Hey guys, it's so nice to see everyone. Terry, thank you for asking me and letting me be of service. I'm going to set a timer because I even bore myself after a while. And it's so good to see all my friends. I have such great memories, and my friends who I haven't spent time with, I look forward to seeing you again. You're welcome, Paul. He is a friend. I realized I heard a speaker the other night, and she said she nests when she comes to the podium, and I do too. I told Paul Hunter I was going to read the book, like kind of glance through it again, so I know what the hell to say, but I decided to take a nap instead. I tried. But I do want to share, first of all, my sobriety date is August of 1983. And I feel like I've told this story, but you know what? It's the only story I have. It's not like we come up with plan B. It's like this is what it was like, but it has changed so much. I have changed so much. You and the steps and Alcoholics Anonymous has changed me. The person who walked in here, I remember Harvey saying this one time when he was telling a story, the man who walked in, for me, the woman who walked in with step one is not the woman who stands here today. It's been a long time between cocktails, but it's been a long time on a spiritual journey that I had no idea, nor did I want to have any idea of. I want to share just today. I went, maybe everywhere, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, this has been my experience. We have the best memorials. And I went to one today, and I just laughed through the whole thing. And some of you may remember Dick G. He was 48 years sober, and it was a Preston group, and the room was filled. And it was story after story after story. And I, too, had my Dick G stories. When I was newly sober, I met him at Trinity Group, which is no longer around. And I was there because, man, I was mad about, when I met him, I was 2 weeks sober, so it's the setting. Talk about film noir. It's a setting for a disaster. But there I was, 2 weeks sober, met him, the angriest person in the room, and then went into this codependency that almost killed me. But I was sobbing and crying and weeping and gnashing of the teeth at Trinity Group, and this guy, Dick G., who was 10 years sober, which is forever, and he chewed on a cigar, stogie, and he said he was a bank robber, and he did carry a gun, always to AA. He was one of those characters that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he would say to me, he'd just start talking to me like a kind, loving person. And I remember Dick, he was involved with this beautiful woman at Trinity Group, and as I said today, he was in way over his head. He knew it, I knew it, everyone knew it. She was rich, she was beautiful, she was smart, and I don't know what she was doing with Dick. But she was with him, and he knew it was, you could see the ending was going to come. So he would call me, and he'd say, "Are you sucking air today?" He had a real Texas, because, if probably none of you have, but if you've ever been in those codependent relationships, when there's a fight or the other one leaves or whatever, sucking air is such a great description. I can't breathe. I didn't hear from him. I can't go on. So we would commiserate about that. But Dick is the one, he would drug me around Dallas. I am newly sober, and this guy had 10 years. And he would just take me to all these meetings. I'd be on the phone crying, and he'd say, "Hey, why don't we just go to AA? Why don't we just go to a meeting?" He took me, and some of you, Alan, would remember the Suburban Club. Donald, you may, it was the oldest club in Dallas. And I'm newly sober, and he took me there as a speaker. I'm 6 months sober, crazier than a bed bug. And you know what happened? You loved me through it. You just loved me through it. And to have those stories about Dick, his last name, he always said his name, Dick Guy, it just was such a joyful occasion to have rooms. I mean, I don't know how many people were there talking about what Dick did just by showing up. Just by showing up. And what he used to say to me is, "Kathleen, we are hanging out so we can hang on." And I realized, that gave me like a wide berth. I don't have to show up with tremendous words of wisdom. I don't have to have an answer. I just have to show up. And I also can hang out with you. I don't always need to tell you, well, it sounds like 4 steps. Sounds like. No, maybe I just need to sit there with you while you're as crazy as you need to be. So it was a full day. And there were tons. I came home. There was so much sobriety in that room. 35 years was kind of like a newcomer. Everyone was older than dirt. And they knew Dick for 45 years, 48 years. But it was such a great, made me think of our history. It made me think of the blessings we have. And I started the morning with centering prayer. And I want to share this. I want to share what happened this morning. There's a group of us who've gotten involved with centering prayer. It's just 20 minutes of meditation. And I got turned on to it years ago when I went on a retreat with Michael and Harvey and Paul Hunter and Jacqueline, and a bunch of us went to Santa Fe. And it was 12-step centering prayer, practice of our 11th step. And I thought, well, I do the 11th step. When I'm at the gym on the Stairmaster, I repeat the Our Father. That must be like meditation. And I got to this retreat. We signed up, and a bunch of us went. I'm long-term sober. And it was this group from St. Louis. And they wanted to talk about really practicing our 11th step, where we get quiet, like the Oxford group, praying for guidance. And there were over 100 people in Santa Fe. It was at a convent. And these were all volunteers from St. Louis. And they talked about how we listen. I'm real good at prayer. I can pray nonstop, all the time. But do I listen? And that was one of the first times where I realized I had to just be quiet, to shut up for a minute. And flash forward, I would do it here and there, the centering prayer. And I went to a couple of retreats because, I'll do anything but except do it. I'll go to another retreat and learn how to do it again. So I went out to Mobile, Alabama. And it was a lot of fun. I went to Sedona, nothing but in my backyard. But here's what happened. COVID, right? One of the worst things in the world. For me, for all of us, I think. It was a time of great fear and helplessness, not hopelessness. So I had been following this group from Minneapolis that practiced 12-step centering prayer. I would get their e-newsletter or their newsletters, and I was like, that is so cool what they do. And then one day, it's on Zoom. And one day, because I can't tell the difference in time, although I've traveled around the world, I call them during their men's meeting because I think, well, it's Minneapolis. They must be an hour ahead. And I remember he was so kind. He said, this is the men's meeting. They should have opened it up. But he said, come back in an hour. And started this other journey of being able to attend these 12-step centering prayer meetings on Zoom where we get together and we're quiet. Now, that's pretty phenomenal in itself to have a group of alcoholics be quiet. And and it's open. I don't know who's an alcoholic, but it's open for 12 steps. So after, then I started going to a Tuesday meeting, and then my friend Joni and I, you always need a partner in crime, we loved this. It's my 11th step. It's how I can listen. The Oxford group, and I'm here with a couple of historians, many of them, that's why I love so many of you. You're really interested in the history of AA. And our Oxford group, that's what they practiced. Guidance, listening. And, AA had to do, and rightfully so, a separation from the Oxford group. And so Bill didn't talk about guidance and Oxford group in our literature, but he does talk about our 11th step and how important it is to have this guidance. So a couple months into the deal, Joan and I go, we should start a group here in Dallas. Now, it's all Zoom, so who the hell cares where you are? But we started it 2 years ago, kind of like Patrick and this group. And I thought, I don't know who's going to come, but we will be here. So every week we meet, and we meet to share in silence, and we meet to talk about the guidance from God. The Oxford group used to do guidance where they would get guidance for you. They would share it with you. I got guidance about you today. And I can't imagine that being very popular today in Alcoholics Anonymous, but this is before AA. And I really I want to share something. This is so beautiful. Henrietta Sieberling, Terry, and all my friends, she was a big part of the Oxford group, and she's a key to our history in Alcoholics Anonymous. When Dr. Bob finally went, or he was going to the Oxford group meetings, they would meet in a house and they would pray. And he admitted that day that he was a drunk. Now, everyone knew this. He's an Akron, right? He tells this in his story. And Henrietta and the group said, we will pray for you. And today I can say those words, and it can almost be glib, but how powerful is prayer? How powerful it is when we say, I will pray for you. And they prayed for Bob. And Henrietta had guidance, and she called Ann Smith. And she said to Ann, I have received guidance. Bob should not take the first drink. That was her guidance. Now, we didn't know anything. You know, alcoholism, it's a disease. None of this was known. And then 2 weeks later, in comes this drunk from New York, Bill Wilson. He's from New York. He's a member of the Oxford group. Here's Bob. There were no faxes, no emails. It wasn't like anyone made phone calls. They were all expensive. And this is one of the many beginnings of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a long way to say I started my morning with centering prayer with my Minneapolis group. And this is really what I want to share. We have an 8-minute speaker. It's an hour and 40 minutes, and it's our turn to chair, because they've gone to in-person meetings. So they contacted my friends in Michigan, and as an afterthought, they added Dallas. So people will say that, like this morning, they go, thank you, Michigan. I'm like, when did Dallas become like chopped meat? We're Texas. I mean, thank us. And they say, and Dallas. But I invited a speaker. We have an 8-minute speaker, someone who practices centering prayer. And this woman is lovely. There's centering, 12-step centering prayer all throughout the country on Zoom. And she's kind of, she's an Al-Anon. It doesn't matter. We open it to 12-step. And this is what I witnessed this morning. This is what I witnessed because of you, because you've shown me how to keep my heart open, how to keep my eyes open, and to actually hear something. She's a lovely woman. I've never met any of these people. You know, they're in Michigan. Michigan's my buddy. But Minnesota, they're from all over the country. And she's from St. Louis. And she talks a lot. And I said, well, let's ask Judy. I had asked 3 other people. They all couldn't do it. I said, let's ask Judy. And my friend, who's sober a long time, as only us with a lot of sobriety can be so kind, she said, oh, man, she drives me nuts. And I said, yes, I know, but I think she's available. And someone today at Dick's Memorial said, that's what us old-timers would do. We'd just go out and gossip about everyone. I'm like, yeah, the good old days. Now I'm too old. I just go, are they well? Are they okay? Is their husbands okay? Their wives okay? So Judy shows up, and she is a lovely woman. And what she did is she talked about ACA, and what she did was talk about the wound she carries in her heart. She didn't call it that, but she was so honest in her recovery. She's been practicing centering prayer a long time. And I was able to really look at her and hear what she was saying. She talked about growing up where her mother and father compared her always to her sister. And this is a woman, perhaps not as old as I, a woman who is a nurse, a woman who's raised a family, a woman who worked with kids with COVID during COVID pandemic. And she sat there with this hurt that is so deep and so genuine. And I thought, wow, am I blessed or what to be able to witness this and hear this? So that was my day, right? I got to hear Judy. I got to hear her, truly hear her. And I got to hear the love that surrounds people, all of us who have a wound. And we're human. I believe we all carry wounds. Bill Wilson carried many wounds. And then I got to go to Dick Guy's memorial, where I laughed for about an hour and 15 minutes and then grabbed cake. It's such an AA thing. No shortage of cake there. But coming over here, I just thought, how blessed am I? I would have missed all this. And I know it may not sound glamorous. For those of us who have been around, this is glamorous. This is what happens. As we write, or Bill Wilson wrote in the 12 and 12, we have a spiritual experience. We're able to feel, see, and do, believe things we could never do on our unaided will. And that is pretty phenomenal. So I want to share a little bit about history. You all don't know me. It's the same story, but I do my share. I've learned a lot. I grew up in Philadelphia. When I get excited, you can hear the accent. I grew up in a crazy house. Everybody was screaming and hollering and fighting. My husband has gone back to South Philly. South Philly is a tough little neighborhood. And it's amazing to me how quickly South Philly can come out for me. Very quickly, especially driving. But no, I'm pretty cool with driving. But when people, don't make me go South Philly on you. South Philly is the kind of place I'll share this story. It's funny now, but this is one of the many stories of South Philly. It was, tough little neighborhood like Brooklyn or something, and we all lived in row homes, and everyone, my great aunt raised us, she would get the glass and put it up against the wall so she could hear the neighbors fighting, and there was always a lot of fighting going. People were poor, people were uneducated, everyone's just trying to get by. My mom worked in a factory for 36 years to kind of try and keep us. There were three of us. One died when he was an infant. So here is the best. I don't know why I'm telling you this. This tells it all. My older brother, bad drunk, and then became a drug addict, like he had it in reverse. I was a drug addict and then became a drunk. That is the progress we make. But he started out drinking, became a bad drug addict. He was the kind of guy we talk about. Such a nice guy. If only he didn't drink. If only she didn't drink. How many times we've heard that story? What a nice guy, though. Give you the shirt off his back, except he was totally crazy. So my brother, he was a tough childhood, especially for him. He was the first one. My mother was not married. She had 4 children. I didn't know who my father is. I never met him, I don't think. He died, that's all I knew. And I only knew that because of the way they fought. I didn't know what my name was, really. I knew it was Kathleen Cook. It was just recently, like 4 years ago, I took out my birth certificate. I don't know why, I must have been looking for something. And I read it, and that's not my middle name at all. All these years, I thought my middle name was Teresa. Well, it's not. I'll let you know what my middle name is. Don't tell Social Security, Medicare. They all think it's Teresa. I thought it was Teresa. It's Elizabeth. Now, how the hell could I be so off? I took that birth certificate and got married with it. I guess I never read it. You know how you read things and you don't see it? So that gives you a little understanding. The word we use today is dysfunctional. And I can't say we put the fun in dysfunctional. It was not fun. They were crazy. But there wasn't any drinking. No one had money. I knew this man who was my father was a bad drunk. I knew he died early. So that's the setting. My brother was a mess, just a mess. He was really a good man, but it was tough. He had a very tough childhood, more so than I was the youngest. My brother died. He died of a drug overdose. Well, we don't know, but he was living just this crazy life. He'd gotten married, and the woman was brutal, and cops were called, that kind of life. And he had 2 daughters. So my brother dies. My other brother, they're both very Irish. He went over to see my brother before he died. It's kind of when the body was found and the cops came. This is the kind of neighborhood. The cops said to my brother, the MEs came, and they said, "You better go upstairs and clean out that room." Now, only, would they let you take all the drug paraphernalia. And then as they brought my brother out, my brother Jerry goes, wait a minute, I want to have a beer with him. And as they're loading the body, my brother Jerry pops a can of beer, pours it over Butchie, and has one for him. And I'm like, that's not the story. That's just part of it. I was telling my friend Carol, who I went to from 7th grade, she was visiting while my husband was gone, and we were telling poor Sarah H. this story. And I don't know why, he knows what's going to happen. So my brother dies. I'm home. Paul's my beautiful husband. He's with me. And we're doing what Italians do. We're Irish, but they all married Italian women. And it's an Italian neighborhood. And so we're all in the house. And my sister-in-law is a big girl. All her cousins are big girls. And they're, every minute a cigarette. So you walk in this little row home, and we're mourning. And I have my mother, who's with a cane. She's an older woman. We walked because it's only a block. And these women, there's donuts, just glazed donuts, chocolate-covered donuts, everything you want there, and lots of cigarettes and coffee. And they're all moaning and wailing. And my husband's there, and he had bought me an Hermes scarf. And I had laid it gently on the chair. And then eventually Paul gets up, and he takes the scarf. Alan will appreciate this. He takes the scarf, and he goes, I'm walking back to your mom's house. He's like, can't allow this scarf and all this smoke. No one knows it's. So he leaves, and I'm sitting there, and they're going on. And all of a sudden, one cousin says to my sister-in-law, well, you killed him. Well, my sister-in-law throws back the chair. This is kind of recent, 10 years ago. She goes, trust me, the language is horrid. I'm not going to say it from the podium, but she says, MF, take it to the street. I'll kill you. And next thing I know, these two women are taking it to the street. This is my brother's memorial. I'm like, oh my God. I go, Mom, let's go now. It's time for us. My mother's on a cane. Time for us to leave. So that paints a picture. That is where I come from. When we actually had, you have to eat, and we had big Italian restaurants. And it was, anyhow, my brother, may he rest in peace. He was a good man. He was a good man in his heart, but it was a hard life. And so that paints South Philly. That's enough of that. South Philly is a trip. Paul went back for the first time, and he said, well, this is interesting. And he's the one who pointed out to me that my high school had barbed wire around it. I never noticed. I just figured probably all schools have barbed wire. And then he pointed out to me the barbed wire faced in, which is they were just trying to keep us in. We were called the Goretti Guerrillas for good reason. First of all, it was St. Marie Goretti. Secondly, we were tough. And I'll share one more story. Oh, I'm in my childhood. Probably because I listened to Judy today, and I thought, that childhood, when I got sober, I just thought, it had nothing to do with me. It was tough. You get sober and you move on. But we carry those beliefs. We carry those hurts. We carry that joy. And today, because of the 12 steps, because of my 4-step, 5th step, 10th step, 11th step, because of you, because of all the steps, because you have shared that with me, I can share it now. And I'll just share the last story about the Goretti Guerrillas. And we were proud of that. It wasn't the SMU alumni. It was the Goretti Guerrillas. And those nuns, they just didn't know what to do with us. So what happened was there was a report on NPR, I don't know how many years ago, and it said, well, report from South Philly. There was a peeping Tom near St. Marie Goretti, and the girls, the students, chased him down and beat him up and held him for the cops. And I'm like, yes, the guerrillas have done it again. So it's a long way from South Philly and the Goretti Guerrillas. But drugs and alcohol were a big part of my story. Drugs are part of my story. It was the neighborhood where drugs came in and people were ODing, and all we'd say is, wow, where'd they get it? Step 2, total insanity. Now I'm kind of like, I see a kinesiologist, I see an Ayurvedic masseuse. I'm like, well, I know I don't want to eat that. It's, but at the time, it's like, yeah, good stuff. Where did he get it? And then from drugs came the alcohol. And we take meetings into the women's jail, and we take meetings into the women's prison. And so many alcoholics, so many drug addicts will say, I am not an alcoholic. I am a drug addict, as if there's this distinction that is one to be proud of. I am a drug addict. And I have learned to say, you are always welcome at an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have programs like NA and CMA, and, please just come and give us a chance, give us a chance. And Bill talks about this a lot, not a lot, but drugs were certainly part of early AA story. So flash forward, I'm now I changed everything in my life. I changed the way I dressed, I changed the way I talked, I changed where I lived. I moved to San Francisco. I met really nice people, people who had like mothers and fathers, people whose parents went to school, went to college, they went to college. And, I think alcoholics especially were very good at adapting. But this is where the alcoholic takes it. I started to drink early on after I got out of methadone clinic. All right, that's an outside, I like what we say, that's an outside issue. Well, it wasn't so outside for me. It was very personal. I was in a methadone clinic. We didn't have a lot of rehabs or stuff. I was 21. And I remember learning how to drink alcohol. I didn't really like the taste. I didn't grow up around it. My mother had like slow gin or something. She rarely drank. And it was fun. I hope it was fun. I did it for a while, long time. I'm 21. It's the time when I'm driving down Broad Street in South Philly, and I work 2 jobs, and I'm in after-hour clubs. I'm coming home at 4, 5 in the morning, and the cops stopped me because I went, you don't have to really stop at stoplights when you're 4 in the morning. Everyone knows that, and you're drunk. And I remember those cops pulled me over. They said, we're going to park your car, and we're going to bring you home. And they took me to my little apartment, which was behind a bar, very appropriate. And I remember this cop, if you ever had that experience, you're fading in and out, like, oh, I know he's saying something. I remember where your car's parked. That was a different time. Now I'd be telling you a story of Zoom from Lou Sterrett. It was a different kind of place. But the alcohol, I believe, was fun for a while. I don't remember much of it. It wasn't until I got to AA and you told me about blackouts. I knew I had them. I didn't know there was a name for it, and I never really talked about it because alcoholism comes with a great deal of shame. The disease of alcoholism comes with a great deal of shame. It did for me, and I think for countless others. Wilson talks about Dr. Bob, the 4 horsemen. And that was a time when I'm in San Francisco. I've changed everything. Now I got a promotion. I'm going to LA. I did not graduate high school. Well, I did. I had to go to summer school. I flunked conduct. And it was not because I was bad. It was because the girls' restroom was on the first floor, and there was a window you could open and climb out. And who wouldn't want to do that? I climbed out, and it was kind of neighborhood, it was St. Marie Goretti, 10th Street were one line of boys, 9th Street, as we say in South Philly, 9th Street was another. And so you climb out whatever side window you want to go and who you're going to meet. And so the nuns didn't think that was worthy of a graduation. So I flunked conduct, along with my friend at the time. And this is a funny little story. What were they thinking? They sent me to summer school to learn typing. And thank goodness, because now I'm on a computer. At that time they figured this girl's never going to amount to anything. She better learn the keyboard. And they sent us to an all-boys Catholic school for summer school. It was so much fun. I'm like, wow, those nuns were wild. They were funny, funny women. Anyhow, so I got the certificate, and somehow, I know how, my friend who was visiting me got me into the travel business. They were looking for a reservationist, and I had just gotten off the methadone clinic, and I started in Center City working as a reservationist for a cruise line. And it started a 40-year career in the travel business. And here I am now getting promoted. I'm in LA. Everything has changed in my life. Everything. I'm living in Westwood. I have a company car. I'm traveling this very cool area. Santa Barbara was my territory. I'm selling very high-end cruises. Nothing had changed in my heart. I didn't know that. I thought for sure if I kept changing the outside, I was going to be okay on the inside. And it wasn't until I got to AA and I heard this guy, Dick O, say that, everywhere I go, there I am. I remember thinking that's so profound. And I always say this, but it was like smoking pot. You know how you have those insights when you smoke pot? I was like, wow, that's profound. But you guys always had profound things. We still do. We have that, keep it simple. Really? You don't have more than that? And began the journey. I called Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew about AA. I don't know how I knew. I was taking a Dale Carnegie class on how to speak, how to win friends and influence people. I think that was it. And I was in LA. It was a very LA thing to do. I'm 30 years old. And the instructor was Dale Carnegie instructor. And he also was in AA. And I went to one of those big meetings. I think it was a Clancy meeting, Pacific Heights or Pacific Palisades. And he invited me, and I thought it was a date. So I said yes. And now I show up, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people going into this meeting, and they're carrying big cases of soda and water. And there were 2 speakers. So funny, I remember this. And I identified with both those speakers. And then I thought, those poor things, they can't drink. The thought of not drinking is like so bizarre for someone who is an alcoholic. How do you not drink? So a couple years later, I found out how. You told me. There's a whole book on it. There's a chapter. It says how it works. And to admit to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. For most of us, it's a painful journey. It's a hard journey because ego and fear come and tell me, you don't need to say that. You're going to control this. The great dream of every alcoholic, someday I will drink like everyone else. I will drink normally. Well, no alcoholic I know wants to drink normally. I want to drink everything you have and go into a blackout and make a fool of myself. That's what I want to do. And then wake up with that shame and regret and say, man, I was just going to have a couple. I was just with one of my sponsees. Many of you know her, our friend Brooke. I was with her and her baby, Maya. And I always tell this story because I think it's such... Brooke was young. She was like 19, first time she went into treatment. And I think when I met her, she was 22 or 23. And she has 14 years sober, and she has babies, and just this beautiful life. But I remember her story and her saying she would go out, young, beautiful blonde in Florida, lots of trouble, and she would collect the swizzle sticks in her drink. So she'd put them in her purse and try to remember how many drinks she had. And I thought, that is such an alcoholic story. Let me see if I remember how that happened. So, and here I am sitting in the middle of a miracle with her the other day, with this 1-year-old. And Brooke, sober, 14 years, married. And I think, how many times I get to witness these miracles, and I forget they're miracles. I don't take it for granted, but I forget that I'm here with people I've known 30-some years. I forget that's an amazing experience with new friends, that today is the day we came to AA. Today is a good day. I'm sober. And it took a while for that all to happen. You know, I've outlined so many things in my big book, and I never refer to it. I just like to have it as a security blanket. And also in language of the heart. I'm going to share more of what it's like, because I've been sober longer than I was alive when I came in. I was 32 when I came in. With a lot of God's grace and your help, I'll celebrate 39 years in August, which is kind of shocking, because when I called AA, I was very clear in my instructions. I called and I said, I just want to stop for 3 or 4 days, because why would you stop longer? And I remember that woman, they're all gone now. You know, they were younger than me at the front desk, and they just said, why don't you come in here? Why don't you come in here? And come in at 6, because that's when we like to have cocktails. And I thought, well, that sounds civilized. I was now taking wine classes at the Melrose. So it was all about, you know, I'm looking good. What they didn't know, what I didn't realize is, you know, it's not normal to take wine classes and then go home and finish whatever else you have into a blackout. That was normal for me. And I don't know when we cross that invisible line. I've heard you tell about it. I don't know the day. I don't know the drink that happened. All I know is that I couldn't stop drinking. And I knew about AA because I would get the crying drunks when I lived in San Francisco, and I'd look it up. I thought, man, I don't want to do that. And I had been to that meeting in West Hollywood or LA, Pacific Palisades. So I knew something about, I didn't know much. I just figured it's probably the end of the road. It is pretty bad when you have to go to AA. This is a woman who's been in a methadone clinic, who's lived in flop houses in Center City, who has done a number of things. I don't really want to talk about it. And yet, AA, there is a limit. So, we take meetings into the women's jail. Zoom meetings into the women's jail, which is great for the volunteers, perhaps not so great for the women in jail, but we're grateful to do it. And they're always like, I don't need to go to AA. I just need to get him sober, or I need to get my kids sober, or I need for them. And how many times I thought that if all this, and it says it in our book, I am the director. If they'd only do what I say, if they'd only act the way I think they should act. But no one did. So begins the journey of Alcoholics Anonymous. And amazing things have happened, as it does for each one of us. And if it hasn't happened, please stay. please stay. You know that little thing, expect a miracle? And I heard a speaker say, it isn't like there's just one. You're not going to get one miracle and that's it. That was it. The miracles continue. Every time I run into someone in AA, every time I get to share, when we heard about our friend Bruce, my heart was just, I prayed every night for him. And our other friend, Jeff, and my heart was saddened, and I prayed for him. Alan let us know. And I wore my Bruce Horton pin tonight. He knows I like the Virgin Mary, and he made this for me. So it's an honor, Bruce, that he's always here with us. I would have missed all this. I would have missed that conversation today. I got married in sobriety. I was 7 years sober. I found my husband at a halfway house for ex-convicts. He was not living there, nor was I. So you could see improvement along the lines. And I had never been married. I never thought I could take those vows. And I had not met Paul. And because I'm a sober woman, I was 7 years sober, and I met Paul. And I realized I could be a great wife. I could take those vows and I could mean them. And we had a sober wedding, which is just like ridiculous. I remember when the first day I walked in, that's my two questions to these 4 women who grabbed me. I said, well, what do you do on New Year's Eve? Because we all know that's the time you're allowed to drink. Everyone needs to be blinded, drunk by then. I found out people don't do that. I was shocked. Why wouldn't you drink all night if you could? And then my next question to them, August 10th, 1983, was, what do you do at weddings? Because that's the other time it's really legal to drink, and someone else is paying for it. And they asked, are you getting married? I said, no. Are you dating? I said, no. I just want to know, how do you do a wedding without drinking? And then 7 years later, I had a sober wedding. We had a sober wedding. There was no alcohol served. It was in the basement of a church. And most of the people were AA. And the woman, my first sponsee, was there in a wheelchair because she would get drunk and she would show him. And that night, she was almost 6 months sober, and she showed him, the ex-husband. She was so blind drunk, she ran into a car wreck. And she woke up as a quadriplegic. And her name's Cindy, and she's gone on. But I also saw the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. I saw the richness of what happens when one of us are wounded. I forget who says it. We don't leave our wounded behind. That room in intensive care filled with alcoholics, recovering alcoholics. And it filled, we were waiting outside because intensive care, as we know, you're only allowed to go in a couple times. And her family, she was from Amarillo, Texas. She was a flight attendant. And the doctor came out and said to us, people who normally would not mix, people who couldn't stop drinking, people who couldn't show up. And that doctor came out and said, why don't you all go in there? Because she doesn't want to live anymore. And that room filled up with alcoholics. And laughter actually came into that room. And a bunch of us learned how to take care of her. That changed my life. So many things that you have done, because you've shown me how to live. You changed my life. And today I don't need these war stories. I don't need to tell you how bad alcoholism and drug addiction is. We know how bad it is. We have walked down that valley. Some of us make it out. And that's the miracle, that we even make it out of there. But Cindy changed things for me. I started to realize that alcoholism is serious business. I repeated what you said. You say, oh, if you drink, you'll die. If you drink, you'll go into an institution. If you drink, you'll go hospitalized. And then I got to see it. And I went, you were serious. You're not just telling me a story. I got to see that beautiful woman with her long hair, just all of it fall out. And I got to see the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know if Cindy stayed sober. I would go visit her. She moved to Corpus Christi. That relationship ended. He saw her once. It was over. Anyhow, I was just telling my friend who graduated. We were here a couple of weeks ago. She became a Southwest flight attendant. And you know how we do. We just meet someone and say, hey, you want to go to a meeting? And I just remember Southwest Airlines, how they stepped up to help Cindy. She had been with them a long time, and they created a position for her. I don't want to go on about Cindy's story except to say that It changed my life, as your stories have changed my life. So I'll share something more au courant. Many of you know I was here last year. My sponsor died. She was my sponsor for 31 years. I have not found another sponsor. I don't want another sponsor, let me just say that. I don't want to repeat the story. I want someone who knows it all, and I could just call her, and she would just go, oh, honey, screw them. And sometimes you need a sponsor to say that. She wouldn't say, wow, it sounds like your first step. She'd say, oh, screw them. And I think you're right, Baba. And she would always, before we gossiped, she was from Texas, and she would say, as long as we say, bless their heart. And then and I thought, yeah, that's what I want. And I've looked at our history, and I've looked at what Bill Wilson did, and how Father Ed Dowling was his sponsor, his spiritual guide, and how he always kept Ebby, who did not stay sober. Terry talks about it, great pictures, Terry, of Ebby coming to Dallas and having his longest amount of sobriety, 7 years, and how Bill always referred to him as his sponsor, although Ebby never stayed sober, but he carried the message. And I look at people who have come into my life and how important they are. They carry the message, a message of recovery, a message of hope, a message of like, don't do this, Kathleen. All kinds of messages. But the message I get most today is a message of love, a message of kindness, a message of goodness, whether it's my centric prayer, it's sitting at that memorial for someone who was sober 48 years and touched people's lives. And what he taught me was I don't have to be this wise, knowing person. I just have to sit there sometimes. So let's share what's going on now. It's very exciting. Although I had dental surgery, I'm badly bruised and Paul said, don't call attention to it, but I have to. I want you to feel very sorry for me. And it's very easy to be grateful when you feel good. I did not feel good when I got done with you should see the dentist. He's probably on a golf course, right? Me. He goes, it'll bruise. You know when you're coming out of like that sleep? And they kept repeating that. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know it'll bruise. Geez, thank goodness I told Steve, Mark Carroll had turned me on to the best cover-up makeup. So I'm here tonight in honor of Mark, too, Bruce and Mark. But what happened, beside that being a big deal, I don't have a tooth for another 5 months. That's another story. And you guys have heard this, there has been an international women's conference. It's not open to men. It is a women's conference. It is, and of course we had to have the talk. What if someone shows up dressed like a woman? I'm like, let's get past this. Who cares? You know, if someone wants to come in this conference that bad, what did Bill do? What did Bill do when Barry Leach called him and said, I have someone here who's dressed as a woman with rouge and blue eyeshadow, and he's drunk and just got out of prison? Bill said, does he want to stop drinking? What did Dr. Bob say when this was an issue? You know, what would the master do? So, I had to type that all up and send it to the committee, because by God, I'm going to be right. So anyhow, that's the sign of the times. But I want to share what happened recently. So this International Women's Conference, I know there's no big deals. I want to share with you it's a big deal. It was here 35 years ago in Dallas. It goes to a different city every year. We put a bid in. Many of you know my friend Jacqueline. A bunch of us, there were 6 of us. We had the best time in 2003. We put together a knocked-out bid, because you got bid for this conference. And we went to Seattle. We put the bid in. We even dressed. That time you could get dressed up. We had like costumes with fringe. We rode little wooden horses out onto the stage. We're shameless. That's what happens when you become Alcoholics Anonymous. Do anything for AA. We had a song made up for us, deep in the heart of Dallas. I came out with all my Neiman Marcus bags. Jacqueline came out with it was brilliant. We didn't get the bid. We were brilliant. We had a great time. We didn't get the bid. So we were guided, me and my other friend, that we should do this again. We should put a bid in. It had been 30-some years. And a group of us got together and we put a bid in for 2019. We didn't get the bid. And another group, they were part of it. I had to give up because I was getting, you won't believe this, but I was getting really resentful. They were pissing me off and they weren't doing it right. So I realized probably it's time for me to step aside. And I did, and they got the bid. So we have this conference coming up next year. There'll be 3,000 sober, it's AA, women coming to Dallas, Texas. And my job is outreach. I'm not in charge. I keep reminding myself. They keep saying, it's not your lane. Well, I'm sorry, but it is my lane. It's all my lane. I have another best friend who said, it's God's lane and you're in it. I go, yes, I am. So we're putting a cookbook together, and we had fundraisers, and it's been a blast. And I keep my eye on what it is, bringing the message of love and hope and recovery to a bunch of women who never knew about this conference. 4,000 women show up in L.A. We were in Phoenix, 3,500 women. They do a state call. 8 women from the great state of Texas, 8. That's all that were there. I'm like, how come this could be around 58 years and no one knows about it? So my job was to let people know, and I know I'm probably bore you to tears because you're not invited, but I want to talk about the phenomena that has happened. I'm sober a long time. Life is in session. Illness comes, life comes, loss comes, and joy comes. So I decided to have a mailing party. Yes, a mailing where they write envelopes and mail things. And I got somehow in a group forked over a list that was out of date. But that's a whole other story. I called a friend who works at Maggie's house, a big recovery house, not a big, a small, very important recovery house, been around 35 years. And she said, I'll bring them. We had a motley crowd. We did that. It's my timer. Just stops talking. We did have a motley crowd. It was so fun. There were 12 women sitting around a table at my home group, and I had all the envelopes. People donated stamps, and we started addressing envelopes to the Dallas groups. I think SML got one. And one of the young women seemed to have to inform me that you could run labels. I'm like, I'm not that old. I do know you could run labels. But then we wouldn't sit here and talk. We wouldn't, and we did that with SML. Remember, we sat around and wrote addresses, and it was such a great experience. I was with a woman who had just gotten out of jail 2 days ago. And she said to me, you look familiar. And it's hard to see them when we're on Zoom because they all have to wear masks. And she said, you were at the meeting. You take the meetings into jail. And I thought, what a gift. I'm sitting here addressing envelopes with someone who's in jail 2 days ago. So that was something that just happened like 3 weeks ago. Now I have the Oklahoma City list. So I'm going to get this motley crew. Well, they're so fun. I want women to feel involved. I want you to feel involved. I need to feel involved, that I'm part of this great movement. And so outreach. So I'm doing my little outreach, and then I do an international outreach, and I make this woman in Paris. That's Paris, Texas, Paris, France, not Paris, Texas. And she's lovely, and we translate the flyer. She translates the flyer into French. We now have it in Spanish. We have it in Bulgarian. So wild. Anyhow, she said, I have some women, a woman from Mongolia, who wants to know about this. And I said, well, we'll have a Zoom, and we'll tell her. And this was probably 2 weeks ago on a Sunday morning. 7 of us got together. Now it's 6 a.m. Dallas time. It's 8 p.m. Mongolian time for my friends who are planning a trip to Mongolia, and you may. It used to be on my list. It's between China and India. And we were all up. You know, I had the lipstick on, the earrings on, I'm ready. And there were women, one from Paris, a woman from Ireland, my friends from Florida, all women. There were 7 of us. And the screen comes on, and there were 7 women from Mongolia. And they were all dressed up. And they told us that some of them had driven hundreds of miles to come to this. And all they had was a room with a circle. And they had beautiful, like, pink and blue and all these colors. And they didn't all speak English, of course. The one spoke English. And what happened is they had the flag, the Mongolian flag. And Terry may understand this. I happen to have a Mongolian big book. I know. I haven't read it yet, but I've collected books from all over the world. And I've collected books like the furthest place I could think of, you know. Mongolia, of course, Laotian and Vietnamese, Chinese, Hindi. And I've learned a lot about the printing and how you do this. And I have a little Mongolian flag. And there these women were sitting there with the flag of Mongolia, nothing else. And they said, the one interpreter said, we want to sing a song for you, which is very international. Cultures like to do that for you. And they got up and they sang a song, and then they introduced themselves, and then they each said a step in Mongolian. Now, I'm here to tell you that was one of the most amazing things I have participated in, the language of the heart. Bill Wilson has written in this book, Language of the Heart, and I won't read it because I forget to read that stuff. He wrote, someday, in every hamlet, there will be Alcoholics Anonymous. Marty Mann talked about that. She joked about it. Oh, yeah, someday it'll be all over the world. And here we were, 7 women from the United States and France and Ireland, and 7 women from Mongolia. And we all hung up after that. We told them about the conference. We're going to do Zoom International. We won't have their language, but she spoke English. She's coming to Chicago for a conference, the one woman who speaks English. And my friend Joan said, I'll meet you there. And then I said, well, I'll meet you there too. So our goal is to go to Chicago in July and meet our new friend from Mongolia. What an amazing experience. Who could have imagined? They couldn't even give this book away, right? We're just talking about priceless books. They couldn't give this book away. And I'll share one other story that's very meaningful to me. I went to the last conference in Indianapolis. I drove because I have storyboards. You know, it's never over till it's like totally overdone. So I've got storyboards of these women. I do the history. And they had the big book, the original manuscript, on exhibit. It's a big deal. The man who owns it is from he owns the Indianapolis Colts. And we were like little groupies. There were 2,000 women there. They had a guard, of course. It sold for $2.4 million. And they had it in a special case with lights on it. But it was, we were talking about, it was touching history. I was thinking about that big book and how many lives it has saved. What has happened to us? What Wilson talks about in Language of the Heart. Who could possibly understand this phenomena? All I wanted to do was stop drinking for 3 or 4 days. So I end with this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that is worn, but probably not worn as much as it needs to be, was the book I got when I first came in. It is now published in 70 languages. It's in sign language. It is in Navajo audio tapes. It is being in Ghana. It was just published. And I take the book and go, yeah, coffee on top of it. But it's a book that saved my life. And you saved my life. And how do we ever say thank you for that? We show up no matter what. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.